Hello and welcome to Crucible of Words for more dedicated legacy action. Today we're playing an interesting deck that has been crunching a load of trophies lately. This is a deck from Marcus Ewaldh, also known as I Would Like to Respond on Magic Online. So this is a control deck, and control has been borderline dead in the format for a while. I think so far there's been one top 8 in a challenge from a control deck so far, so not expecting to see many control decks, but this one has been crushing trophies, like I said, so we just had to try it and see if control really is back. It also runs one of my favourite card advantage engines in Legacy, which is Staff of the Storyteller. Love this card. I played it a lot on the channel when it came out, and it's nice to see it back. So we're trying to leverage Staff of the Storyteller. So we have things that make tokens, like Orcish Bowmasters, like Timeless Dragon. We have Retrofitter Foundry, which we can get off our Urza Saga, which also makes tokens. So we're just generating loads and loads of card advantage. The tokens from Tamiyo don't impact it because this is only creature tokens, but Tamiyo is another sort of self-contained card advantage engine that we can leverage. It also makes us clues, which make our sagas bigger, and we got that whole thing going on. We've got a couple of Teferis, which is a good solid card that can answer permanents, bounce them out of play, give us some breathing room, can single-handedly shut down some decks as well. We've got ourselves some removal in Source of Plowshares and Prismatic Ending, obviously Force of Will, and then a bunch of cantrips, Brainstorms, Ponders, and the Lorien Revealed. Our mana base contains a Meticulous Archive, and the rest is just actual lands for mana. So we got Underground Sea, Scrubland, Tundra, and a reasonable selection of basics here. We've got 2 islands, 2 plains, and a swamp. So we should be able to play on basics relatively often. And then we obviously have our Urza Saga, which is going to be one of our win conditions, and an engine in our deck. So we've got basically 3 engines built into our deck. We've got the Tamiyo, we've got the Staff of the Storyteller, and we've got the Urza Saga. And that's quite a nice little package to have. Obviously, the Saga gets the Retrofitter Foundry, which is part of the engine there as well. So, yeah, I really like the look of this deck. I played some Esper Control a while back with Staff of the Storyteller, and also tried it with the 2-mana spell from Outlaws of Thunder Junction that blows up low mana value permanents. So I'm curious to see how this build goes. It's been doing very well for Marcus, and I thought we'd have a crack, because you lovely people out there have been starved of some control content for a while. So hopefully this is the future of control and legacy. That's what I hope. Sideboard-wise, we just got the sort of tools you'd expect. You know, a little bit of hand disruption, some more removal, some different counter spells of different stripes, a little bit of graveyard hate here, a little bit of way of taxing some of these like Stormy decks. We've also got another threat if we need to lean into that, and then we've got another Pithing. So we've got 2 different Urza Saga targets in the sideboard. My initial thoughts on this is that we're a little bit light on counter magic for certain decks. We are obviously leaning very heavily into Consign to Memory, which if it's going to be good in the matchup, it's obviously going to be great. But maybe there'll be times where we would have preferred a 3rd Force of Negation over the 4th Consign. But obviously Marcus has been playing this deck and perfecting it, and I'm just picking it up for the first time. So we're going to see what's going on. I suspect he's probably much more on it with the numbers than I am. Alright, that's it for the deck tech. Please remember to like and subscribe. And if you want to see my videos early for just £1 a month, just £1 a month, you can watch my videos early, and it helps support me and the channel. Alright, let's get controlling some opponents. Okay, our opening's pretty fine. We can just go and get ourselves a basic and play our Tamiyo. We might be in a weird position in terms of what we fetch with our second land. I think I'm okay to fetch a basic with this one, and we can try and use a Brainstorm to get our 3rd land later on. Just don't want to be wastelanded. Not getting done on that front would be pretty handy. So we're just going to get our Tamiyo up and running, draw some cards, do some Brainstorm action, just, you know, good old-fashioned control-y stuff. So now we can hold up Plow, we can also hold up Bowmasters. We've even got a Force of Will to pair with it all. Beautiful. Alright, we've got a clue, so we've got some card advantage for later on. We can Brainstorm and flip this Tamiyo now. Is that where I want to be? I think so. Our opponent might have Orcish Bowmasters in their deck. By going now, we don't have to worry about that. So I will put back this Meticulous Archive, and we can fetch that up later. And then it's a bit trickier what the other one we keep here is. I do want this other land, but if we take it, it's going to come at the cost of one of these. I guess we could just put back the Lorien Revealed. Instead of cycling for the land, we can just have the land in hand. So now we get to flip our Tamiyo and present a clock. Obviously, this doesn't automatically win the game, but it's pretty much close enough. So we're not going to ponder here because this is our blue card for the Force of Will. And we can hold up a Source of Plowshares. We're going to see something like an Entomb here. Nope, just Under the Sea Sewers. They left the card on top, so we don't get any additional information about our opponent's deck just yet, and they found something they want. Underground Sea, Tamiyo. Okay, well our Tamiyo is doing its thing already, so... Do I care about this Brainstorm to flip the Tamiyo? Like, our Tamiyo goes first and we have Prismatic Endings. Honestly, I think I'm fine with this. We could plow it if we are really worried about it. But I don't think this Tamiyo is going to beat us before our Tamiyo pops off. If we can just protect the Queen and win the game off of the Tamiyo, I think that's a pretty satisfactory way to play the game. So we don't want the card on top of our library unless we want to ponder this turn. Because we have a blue card on top, so we can take the blue card and have that to pair with our Force of Will and then ponder this turn. But we already have stuff to do with our mana anyway. So I think I'm going to crack this. And I don't want to get Wastelanded, so I'm just going to get Plains here. The Flooded Strand getting us a black land will be able to be Wastelanded here. Right, so I don't think we need to do anything other than plus this Tamiyo. We just protect the Queen, like I said. And deploy this Flooded Strand. And we have access to Bowmasters, we have access to Force of Will and Plow. One more turn and this gets up to the amount it needs to pop. And when we pop this, the chances of us drawing a Prismatic Ending are quite high, and that can just deal with their Tamiyo before their Tamiyo pops. And we'll have all the counter magic in the world. So we're just trying to keep them off balance. If they play an Orcish Bowmasters to ping our Tamiyo down, it doesn't actually change the clock on this because it's a -7. It just means the Tamiyo will die when it pops. But that's fine. It's already done its job. Flooded Strand from our opponent. They could be on the same deck as us. It's possible. Probably not with double Underground Sea though. Another Brainstorm. I could fire off an Orcish Bowmasters and just get some pings going. Is that something that is important to do here? Because they are representing their own Orcish Bowmasters here. So this probably has to be an Underground Sea here, I would imagine. We'll try it. We'll try it off here. Because if our opponent is just playing an Orcish Bowmaster this turn, that's not going to be very good. If they play a Bowmaster in response to our Bowmasters. Because this allows us to... we can ping this. We can pay for this days with our planes here. Our opponent could be a Doomsday deck, so I will not defend this with the Force of Will. But if our opponent's spending their time and resources on it, that's fine. This is basically their turn. We're just going to use this Force of Will to make sure we can get around the table again with the Tamiyo and win the game that way. Our opponent might go for minusing their Tamiyo because they're in a spot where our Tamiyo is going to pop first. It's going to be a Murkside Regent. We have a Plow that can answer that. There it is. Alright. So we Plow it. If it doesn't work, we can always minus the Tamiyo. That puts us behind on the Tamiyo clock if we do that though. Do I want to ponder first? I could Brainstorm instead of pondering. We get the Brainstorm out of the way before there's a Bowmasters. I like that. Another Plow, but not another land, unfortunately. The Teferi is pretty reasonable here. I'll put back one Ponder and the Bowmasters or the Teferi. It's probably the Teferi here. Let's try and Plow this. I will defend this with a Force of Will. There is a Force of Will. Let's fire back. Because this should secure our Tamiyo popping. We could have done this in the way that we left the Ponder in our hands. So we could still Ponder afterwards. Alright, they're just plussing the Tamiyo. So we have Bowmasters and Plow to deal with their Bowmasters if that's what's about to happen. They're going to flash in the Bowmasters. No, we're just going to draw all the cards you could possibly imagine. We have plenty of bits and pieces going on here. So I'll play out another white source so we have multiple attempts at killing this Tamiyo. Alright, they're scooping it up to that. Not a surprise. So we just protected the Queen there. They didn't get to see too much of our deck. So they look like a pretty stock-looking Esper tempo. A blue-black tempo deck. So we don't really want forces here. We just want more one-for-one exchanges. So something like the Wandering Emperor seems pretty reasonable here, and the Thoughtseizes are pretty good. Same with the Supreme Verdict, just to guarantee the creature to get rid of it. Do we have a way of dealing with the Tamiyo outside of... I guess we have quite a few, right? We have the Ending and the Teferis, and we can maybe attack it a little bit. So we could run these two Thoughtseizes. That looks like quite a clean 4-for-4. We're just going into one-for-one plays here. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I don't think we need anything like Pithing Needle here. Alright. We're just going to be trading 1 for 1, then gassing back up. And that should be pretty handy for our deck. Our opponent playing things like Tamiyo is quite a slow clock, so it gives us plenty of time to actually have a life total that works. Whereas if they were playing Delvers and things, then all of a sudden we're on the back foot. Do we have to play into day so that we can survive long enough? We can just wait for the Tamiyo to flip, and we have loads and loads of turns, and then just nail it with a Prismatic Ending. I wouldn't mind another Prismatic Ending in the list, but there's only so many things you get to have, right? And Teferi can still do some work, do some bouncing, get everything going nicely for us. Teferi is we have Teferis and Plows, so we have some very, very good cards in this matchup that our opponent doesn't get anything close to from their side of the board. So we will be exposed with this Polluted Delta here. But we have some pretty solid tools for the matchup. I think we'll keep this one. So we kind of have to hope that our opponent doesn't wasteland this source. Alright, they're not playing a turn 1 threat. That is perfect for us. I don't think we get to just play this and get an island and ponder, but if we draw a white source, we do. We could always try and ponder into a white source. But if we miss on that, it's going to suck big time. We still have a little bit of play with the Bowmaster. I'm going to believe in the power of ponder. Not a bad thing to believe in at the end of the day. Okay, Timer's Dragon. That is a white source. Meticulous Archive is a white source. Not necessarily the white source we desperately want right now, though. So I think we will bury the Emperor for now, and then we'll probably end up drawing the Archive and the Dragon. So the Dragon's going to be a reasonable sized creature. We can play the Urza Saga and then cycle for a Plains. Or we can play the Swamp, hold up Orcish Bowmasters. We've got some options available. Alright, this Brainstorm is fine because there's not a Tamiyo in play, so there's no sort of impending clock based on this. We can go get our basic Plains and our opponent can't waste us off of removal. And everything should be going quite nicely from that point on. A Tamiyo, just a naked Tamiyo. No mana up to deal with this. So we could Meticulous Archive and get rid of the Wandering Emperor. I don't want to do that. Would I like to play this Swamp so that we can hold up Bowmasters or Cycle of Timeless Dragon? I think that's probably where I'm at here. It just gives us the most options this turn. It does mean that we're going to be behind on cranking out Saga tokens, but Saga tokens are not always going to be reliable because our opponent has things like Wasteland in their deck. They might have eased back on the Wastelands though. Right, let's Plane Cycle. Stifle here would actually be pretty annoying for us. But I don't believe our opponent is running Stifle. I could see Consign to Memory. That would work as well. A Thought Seize. We've got Plains here. I like lots of options. I think we're going to Thought Seize here. It means we are shields down in terms of being able to cast a Bowmasters. But we get to have a look at what our opponent's working with, and we can then better use our removal spells. And we don't have to play this game around the Tamiyo of when or we can or cannot flip. Just 1 for 1 trade in, and eventually we'll gas up. Now our opponent is kind of ahead on the gassing up plan because of the Tamiyo right now. But we've got some good kind of ideas in our hand between the Staff and the Sagas. We should be A-okay here. We might be in a situation where we just slam the Staff this turn. And then from that turn onwards, we are drawing an additional card every turn. But it will cost us our white mana to do so. What do you have here? Shoot the Sheriff we don't care about. Brazen Borrower we don't care about. The Baleful Strix is a little bit annoying because that is kind of actually we can cover the 1/1 quite easily. Murktide Regent. We could take the Brazen Borrower because I think they're going to deploy the Brazen Borrower right now. If we take that, they just do nothing this turn. I don't hate that. So if they find a land next turn, they're going to flip their Tamiyo. How much of an issue is that for us? I guess they can do that even if we take the Strix. I'll take the Borrower here. So we could just deal with this Tamiyo right now, but then we kind of want to have access to dealing with their Murktide Regent later on. So I think we're just going to jam the Storyteller, the Staff of the Storyteller, get this grinding up. Like, are they going to want to spend removal on our 1/1 guys? Or on the 1/1 guy this gives us? Probably not. This will check the Baleful Strix at least. It can chump block for a turn if we need to against the Murktide Regent. We've got a Plow for that already though. Okay, we're seeing a crack in the fetch land, so we might be seeing Surveil into Crack Clue looking for days. But if they do that, then that's one less clue for later on. All right, nothing going on. So they would have to play the Baleful Strix if they want to flip the Tamiyo this turn. This is probably the turn they play the Baleful Strix out, because otherwise the Orcish Bowmasters is very good into it. Like, it's going to be good into it anyway. We get to ping it down and stuff. Okay, so they're brainstorming and playing the Baleful Strix, perhaps. We will need to answer this Tamiyo, but that is what the Urza Saga is hopefully going to achieve. But they've got 2 removal spells to point at our guys. So it might be a little bit tricky. We've got 2 answers for it that just straight up kill it, and then we can also bounce it with Teferi. There is an Orcish Bowmasters. I assume this is going to ping our Spirit Token. They might have put back some removal, so we can leverage these Urza Sagas. Another Swords to Plowshares. So we're definitely killing this. I think that's the easy part of this turn. Alright, they've got a Force of Will. Pitching the Baleful Strix. Okay, so I think we need to get the Saga running. We could fire off this right now and just be shields down on a plow. But we probably need to plow the Bowmaster before we start drawing extra cards. So I'm going to deploy this construct. Do we have any 1-mana spells that could be useful here that we can cast off of an Urza Saga? We do. We have access to the Retrofitter Foundry, which we could deploy. Or we could deploy a Saga Lantern, which deals with this. But I think we're just going to hold up and plow the incoming Murktide. And then we're going to have to try and work through this Tamiyo. Maybe we should have snapped off the removal spell earlier. We'll take this damage. Our life total is not really what I'm bothered by at the moment. What is this? Kaito. It is a Kaito. Alright, our opponent had a pretty good brainstorm there, getting them the Force and the Kaito. We don't get to do anything about this. Okay, so now we probably have to plow the Bowmasters. You know, our opponent just has their engines online and they are pulling ahead. Alright, so we're going to plow this Bowmaster so we can try and get some cards with the Staff the Storyteller. So this is going to start ticking up, which is good. And we're drawing a card here. We're trying to find ourselves a Prismatic Ending. That's exactly the thing I wanted. Okay, I'll play this Meticulous Archive. So we're going to answer the Tamiyo just before it pops off. And then we also have access to a Thoughtseize to make sure that our Prismatic Ending resolves. Then we're going to have to deal with this Kaito, which is a different problem. But one thing at a time here. We can't let our opponent draw their whole deck, or half their deck. Soul Guide Lantern. I don't think that's what I'm about right now. This is also our second white, which is quite an important thing to have, considering we're trying to do Staff the Storyteller stuff, as well as fire off white removal. So that is a little bit of tension in our mana base in terms of trying to play on basics, but also needing 1 white every turn, as well as white for our interactive spells. Just something to note. Obviously, Marcus, who built this deck, has refined it based on these things, but just coming to it fresh like I am, I think it's important to give my thoughts on those aspects. Maybe we're supposed to fetch more Tundras or Scrublands. So this Kaito is going to get pretty obnoxious. I suspect they're going to attack us and Surveil. 6 cards in hand. And the Wasteland. That's pretty good. I will make our friend. We'll trigger the Staff of the Storyteller. Tamiyo is getting ready to pop. And firing off a Fatal Push. And crack a Clue. Try and make another land drop. No, they already made the land drops. They made the Wasteland this turn. What are you up to over there? A Murktide region. That's fine. It's not fine, but we have solutions to that particular problem. So we need to Thoughtseize our opponent here, because we need to make sure that this Prismatic Ending resolves. A Fatal Push and a Ponder. Is it the push that we take or the Ponder? If we take the push, they can't deal with our Saga token, which gives us something to pressure their Kaito with, which I think is essential here. Okay, so now we will, pending the Tamiyo, we can deploy this, and then we have to plow the Murktide. So we've only got one problem to deal with, and hopefully running Saga constructs can do a good job of doing that. But this is probably going to hit us for 4 this turn, or they're going to draw an extra card off it. Either way, not ideal. It can use its ability to freeze a Saga construct, but it will. The first one will get a chance to attack. Okay, so they're probably just drawing an extra card because they chose not to pump it. They're just doing the 0 mode. Pretty strong though. It's a lot of selection. Him to Turak. Cool. Ponder from our opponent. Misty Rainforest. Not the Flooded Strand we've already seen. That was an interesting choice. Especially if you're just going to get an Underground Sea anyway. A Baleful Strix. Yep, that makes our plan to attack the Kaito a lot more difficult. This Kaito card is really good. Should not be underestimated. So we could play a land. We could crack the Staff of the Storyteller first. Just to see if we find anything particularly useful right now. Another land, not the most useful. We do need more white sources in general, so I think I'll play this one out. So we have a construct ready to go, and we're probably just playing the Staff of Storyteller. Before we do the Saga, so that we get an extra counter on the staff. This will also charge up the existing staff. But we have to get through this Kaito. This means that these Urza Saga constructs will be large enough to deal some real damage. We might be able to double block on the Kaito as well. I think we need to fetch a plains before our opponent gets to a situation where they can make a wasteland, because then we get in this awkward thing where we might not have the mana to Urza Saga. So I'm going to crack this now. Magic Online will allow me. We do need to also consider our clock in this game. I will get this plains just so we have more white mana available for the reasons I've mentioned. So we can put 4 power in front of this Kaito this turn. Cracking a clue. So they can just pump the Kaito so we don't get to do that. And we do have to block the Kaito if it attacks. And they pumped it. We just have to block it if it attacks with the Baleful Strix, because we are only on 4. Okay, so they're getting an emblem here. Am I making this now? I could just block this and then make a construct to try and beat the Kaito next turn. I think that's the correct line here. This is why we took the removal out of their hand earlier. Making a friend. Charging up our staffs. A Retrofitter's Foundry. I will. It's kind of awkward what mana we tap here. We probably need to keep the black available, although we do have black in hand. So maybe we can just tap out of these colours. We don't have anything to fetch off of this now because of our Retrofitter's Foundry, which is kind of annoying. So we deploy this Retrofitter's Foundry. This will give us a construct that will be able to kill the Kaito. A daze. Am I going to regret playing out, not playing out its land first? I got a 3rd daze. Okay, so we can go to attacks. Attack the Kaito. We could crack this now, but going to 1 is kind of scary. Sorry, we'll be going to 1 because they are an Orcish Bowmaster deck, so I don't think I want to open up that line for our opponents. We can dump a load of mana and get a 1/1 Thopter to check this Baleful Strix. So it's 2 mana, 3 mana, 4, 5, 6 mana. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So pretty close to that. Okay, they didn't chuck in a Kaito, which is another thing we have to be wary of. A land that we can tap would not be the worst thing right now. We might have to just draw from the staff and hope that they don't have a Bowmaster. Like, we're probably dead to Bowmaster either way. We could get Scrubland, draw here. Leaves us dead to Bowmaster. But we're probably dead to Bowmaster anyway. 3 cards in our opponent's hand. Alright, I think we're going to go for the Scrubland here. We need to start getting some more cards. This gives us our 2nd black as well. Having a little bit of lag issues, which is costing us deep in the purse in terms of our time here. Okay, Source of Plowshares. Big fan of seeing that. Having an attack. So we could play around a removal spell. We already know that we already know that we're going to be drawing some cards here. So we may as well start cracking. Okay, we've got another land. Don't mind seeing that. I think I'm okay to brainstorm here. Supreme Verdict isn't really what I want right now, but might become something we want later on. I think we'll put them... Actually, I don't really like this Lorien Revealed. We can use the Lorien Revealed to shuffle. So we could put like Brainstorm and Supreme Verdict on top and then choose if we want the Verdict in a minute, depending on what our opponent does. We probably want to plow this now. But if they have, like I said, if they have the Bowmasters, we are already dead to that, so we don't need to worry about it. I'm not a big fan of plowing this. This is a Force of Negation. A Brazen Borrower. That's pretty darn good, isn't it? We should have done this so that we had time to cycle around and do some stuff. Because now we're just dead to this. Yeah, okay, we can scoop it up. Yeah, we definitely could have played that game differently in a few lines. We could have hit the Tamiyo earlier. It didn't end up mattering, but we could have done. Maybe we want this Toxic Deluge. Just a little bit of extra removal that we can lean upon. What would we cut for this, though? Everything else looks pretty solid. What would I cut for a Toxic Deluge? To get rid of all these little... I don't think we need the Deluge. All right. We're going to put that many creatures in play. Okay, so we get to come out first and establish ourselves. Yeah, there's definitely a little bit of tension with our mana base there. So it's an interesting learning experience. We've only got 8 minutes. Okay, I'll keep this one. Probably have to be fetching non-basics here, but we can plow, we can Thoughtseize and undermine our opponent's hand early doors. And then just set up the Staff of Storyteller and get that up and running. If we continue to have these lag problems, it might be awkward. Okay, I'm happy to take this force of this Thoughtseize. Come on, Magic Online. You can do it. Let me take that Thoughtseize, please. Okay, we don't have anything for our opponent's turn, so we can F6 through it. Just need to be really aware of our clock here. So we could play out this staff, but it's going to get hit by our opponent's Force of Negation. But we can fire off this Orcish Bowmasters first if we want to try and get that out of our opponent. But the pressure is kind of on us. Alright, I'm just going to jam this staff, I think. It's going to get a counter spell from our opponent, but it's going to be him to turret. We're going to take 2 cards out of our opponent. A Brainstorm. So we don't get to Orcish Bowmasters this. I suspect some amount of lands will be going back into our opponent's deck. Or are we just in with this, are we? I'm going to get another Tundra. We don't have another Tundra, actually. That is kind of awkward. So he can cut us off with blue, but we can go and cycle for an island if we need to. So I'm going to get the Scrubland right now. I'm just going to draw a card straight away. This is partly for F6 value, especially when we're getting these weird little lag spikes. Maybe we're supposed to just hold up the Source Plowshares and do it at our opponent's end step, but this way we don't have to worry about Orcish Bowmaster timings. We can just enjoy. We know, okay, they're brainstorming before playing something like a Tamiyo. This is good news for us. Yes, that's a brainstorm we don't get to catch with Bowmasters, but we want to be the second person to play the Bowmasters. So they're going to Bowmasters our Spirit token, and we can Bowmasters there. Or they're just hemming us. Okay. Pretty solid. Okay. Let's cast a Ponder here. Retrofitter's Foundry is pretty nice, isn't it? Let's get the Foundry in. Just worth a Force of Negation to you. It is. Right, so we got our little hymns to turret back at them. I think I will cycle this. We have a Brainstorm on top, though. Right, I'm just going to play this out. I was thinking about maybe cycling and getting the island. Because if our opponent wastelands our blue source and him to turret us, then we have nothing. A Tamiyo, sure. They got the third Brainstorm. Okay, they got a Ponder. They might have double Ponder. This means that we can Brainstorm without worrying about the Bowmasters next turn. We also have a Shuffle queued up for it. Let's Brainstorm another Staff. That is some pretty big game. I don't think we need the Supreme Verdict anymore. And I'll put back the island. Get the Staff in. Do we have any more white sources? We don't have another Tundra. I would like a blue source here, so I think we probably just go and get the... I guess we get the plains here. And I'll draw one of the cards now. Now there's not Bowmasters up. I'm just going to draw and not care about Bowmasters. Come on, Magic Online. I don't know how many minutes of our clock has been burned because of this. I reckon it's about 5 minutes. No point attacking. If they fit with Tamiyo, it obviously makes our spirits not do a lot of damage. Orcish Bowmasters picking off one of our little friends. Tamiyo getting stuck in. Not blocking. So this Lorien Revealed doesn't feel great right now. It really doesn't feel great right now. Kind of wish we had that Supreme Verdict now. Urza Saga. Alright, I'll play this Urza Saga out. I will play out this... we're not going to play out the Lorien Revealed, obviously. I don't think we're going to cycle it now either. We can use this as a shuffle, or if we can clean this up, we'll be okay. Alright, a Wasteland. Sure. It's always going to happen. I think our opponent gets to win this one. We're just too far behind on clock. Obviously, the board is actually quite impressive as well. I don't think we are playing optimally, given the lag and the time we're having here. Okay, I will deploy this Tamiyo. Probably have to chump block. I will go and fetch a Meticulous Archive. If we can find our Supreme Verdict, then I think we're in good shape. 1, 2. So we have to block the Murktide here. We could, well, we don't have to. It doesn't feel great if we don't. If we can't really draw a Brainstorm here. No, I think we're on the try and Supreme Verdict here. So maybe we need the extra card draw. It's pretty disgusting. A Swords to Plowshares. That does something for us. We get to kill this Murktide Regent. Hopefully. Okay, so we took out the Murktide. I'm going to leave this in hand for Brainstorm purposes. We're going to go to 1 this turn. And then we have to draw the Supreme Verdict. Is this a Brazen Borrower? No, just a clue token. We probably cycle the Lorien Revealed. Just so... Okay, they got snuffed out. That's lethal here. Yeah, GG's. I think that game was definitely winnable for us. It definitely kind of snowballed the wrong way at a certain point. I felt like we were in ascendancy and that we didn't need the Supreme Verdict. Then all of a sudden we desperately needed it and it kind of all fell apart. Yeah, a bit awkward. Our mana base was something we stumbled over a few times. We had a whole bunch of different decisions we could have made. And I think given a little bit more experience with this deck and the play patterns, we'd probably win that game. Or at least this match in general. Alright, let's go to round 2. Right, we are on the play. We have an Island Ponder. But it comes at the cost of our blue card for a Force of Will. So I don't think we do that, but we keep this hand and we deploy the Retrofitter Foundry. Given our dependency for white mana, there is an argument to play the planes out first to make sure we have more white sources if that's the thing we want. We can also make our opponent think that we're not running blue, so maybe they get walked into this Force of Will instead of playing around it. It does mean that we have to crack a fetch to use our Ponder, but I think that is fine. So I'm quite inclined to play this planes out and use this to cast the Retrofitters. Just keep counterspells off of our opponent's radar, and then hopefully we'll be more likely to leverage this Force of Will. Now we will need to draw us a little bit more action. Watery Grave. Our opponent is probably on the Death Shadow plan. Okay, they can have this. It's not worth using 2 cards with Thoughtseize. This is going to be another matchup where you don't really want the Force of Wills. Yep, they took the Ponder, as would I have. An Urza's Saga. I am happy to Urza's Saga here. This gets us a Retrofitter's Foundry token. This also means our opponent knows exactly what's in our hand. So they have a clear runway to do whatever they want this turn. But if they're a Death Shadow deck, they might need to lose a bit more life before this becomes a thing they get to do anything with. Alright, 2 life away from playing, well, yeah, 2 life away from playing a Death Shadow. Ponder, sure. So you can go Fetch, Shock, Shadow. Things get a little bit dicey for us. But we should be pretty good in this matchup because Swords to Plowshares is traditionally very good against Death Shadow because not only do you kill their creature, but you can kill their other creature or make it so they have uncastable creatures in their deck after they've spent a lot of time making it so they can cast those creatures. Allows you to mess around with combat maths by making them gain life as well. Scalding Tarn. Yeah, okay, so I imagine we're going to see Death Shadow this turn. There it is. Let's just create a little friend. So we can chump block this for a while. Okay, they already know we're playing blue. Do I want to start cracking these fetch lands? Let's just go and get an island here. And now we have a creature that's bigger than their Death Shadow, because this is going to be a 3/3. They could quite feasibly be running something like a Dress Down, because Dress Down makes this just a 13/13 because it gets rid of the ability that shrinks it. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was a main deck card they had that they could then leverage. It's just to find like 1 or 2 of in a lot of blue decks anyway, but then it's a card they can leverage with their own game plan quite nicely. I'm going for a Wasteland here, so we do get 1 construct. Magic Online will stop being laggy. We do have a 3/3. If they can't lower their life total though, they can't attack us. They could try a bluff attack, but every turn this construct is going to grow due to our Retrofitter Foundry. So the window of them attacking is potentially going to get smaller every turn, but they have things like Snuff Out in their deck, which can just rip away a construct token from us, or mess with combat mass, make their guy huge. A Murktide Regent, that's a pretty good one too. Okay, can we draw something that isn't a land here? A Staff of the Storyteller, that is not a land. It's kind of what I asked for. It gives us a chump blocker, it grows our construct, so we can block with the servo token, then turn it into a Thopter. We don't have to block a 5/5 Murktide. Ponder from our opponent. I didn't shuffle from their Ponder. This feels like, well, it's obviously like an onboard trap with a scoring time, but we could put loads of stuff under the bus, but I don't think that's worth doing. So they can grow this by 3, so make it 5, so we could block in multiple ways. But instead we're just going to turn this servo into a Thopter, which also gives us another stack on the staff. So Staff of the Storyteller, when it first came out, was genuinely really solid and was a bit of a role player in Legacy in some decks. It made Shark Still, or Shark Tail, as I called that particular version, like a pretty solid deck. And then quite soon after, Orcish Bowmasters came out, which just made the Staff of the Storyteller a lot worse. And it's something that we're going to be living in fear of in this round as well. So we're going to take 5. Be cautious about how much damage we deal our opponent because of the impact it has on Death Shadow. Swords to Plowshares. This is a very nice card to have access to right now. I will fire this off straight away because that gives us more information on what we're doing with the rest of our turn if this resolves. We can crack the staff to draw a card if they interact, but I don't want to crack the staff first in case they have a Bowmasters. This will gain our opponent 5 life, which will also kill their Death Shadow. They can do some Scalding Time shenanigans, but they can only deal themselves 3 damage. Snuff Out. Do I care about this? No, I think that's fine. Okay, so we got to nail the Murktide there. I think I would like to have access to a Plains. I'm really worried about doing stuff with the potential of a Bowmasters up. So I think the plan is just to hold tight. If they crack this, then we can make, and we can draw a card off the staff. We could get a Surveil land. All right, there it is. So no Bowmasters available. We get to draw a card. Brainstorm is an interesting one. It gives us a blue card to go with this Force. They've known we've had this Force for a long time. At some point, they're going to know that we're going to be able to leverage it. We can block with this Thopter and turn it into a 4/4. Or we can just create a servo. Either way, we get a token on our Staff of the Storyteller counter, sorry. I think I'm going to block and get a 4/4. Because now our opponent has to juggle their life total around our ability to pound them with a bunch of constructs. As well as having a creature that can deal with it. I don't think we fire for Brainstorm here. Not the most efficient use of our mana. But that might have stopped our opponent doing anything. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we could just slam a big dragon. I don't really want to do that. I think I would like to draw a card now that we have the ability to deal with the Bowmasters. And firing your Bowmasters, they do not have a Bowmasters. And we have a Plow. That's pretty solid. Do I want to just plow this creature straight up? I don't think we have to. I think we can just continue to make little guys. And then eventually just have a big alpha strike if we want to. If they play another creature, the ability to get a nice 2-for-1 would be good. Maybe that's greedy, but we're the one with the extra cards here. And every single one of these we make is effectively a cantrip as well. A Brazen Borrower. A very brazen choice. I don't care about them having a 3-1 later on. Like, we could do stuff to our own token, but it's not a token that we can sacrifice to retrofitters. I don't want to trade this because then they just crack this and it doesn't help. Okay, I think we're just going to plow this. You can let them go to damage first and see if they do anything in response. Right, there's just Dallas 4, that's fine. In the end step, we will make a friend. I think a Meticulous Archive is better than this Timeless Dragon. Like, they've just had enough of what we've got going on here. We just have more resources than our opponent. Alright, like I said, Force of Wills, we don't want these. We just want 1-for-1 interactions. Get the Wandering Emperor in there. Get some Thought Seizers in there. Just trade them 1-for-1. This all looks fine to me. Saga Lantern is a redraw and sometimes messes with Murktide, so I think it's worth having that in. I think it's better than the Pithing Needle, which can name Wasteland. Maybe we name the Wasteland. Alright, yeah, I've convinced myself. We'll try it with the Wasteland as a thing we can name with the Needle. Okay, we can get our Tamiyo up and running. So we're probably going to get the basic island off of our Polluted Delta. And then that does change things a little bit. I don't think... Are we supposed to just fetch into Wastelands? I think we are, which is a little bit annoying. So this first one is probably the C. And then we'll just jam a Tamiyo. Because if this gets Wastelanded, then we can't play an Orcish Bowmaster on turn 2 anyway. So there's no point having the black mana. We'd much rather have the white mana. We're hoping to floop some Urza Sagas into play, which maybe makes our opponent's Wasteland get directed towards the Sagas. So this could be a daze to deal with our Tamiyo, which is okay with me. It gives them another chance at hurting themselves to make shadows come online. And we've got Brainstorm first, so they could be brainstorming into an answer, or they could just be setting up for a sort of specific play for turn 2. And they might as well do it in response to Tamiyo in case things line up in a way that means it's worth dazing or forcing this. We'd love to see a force on this. Get some cards out of our opponent's hand on a card that we already have another copy of. Right, we're just in with the Tamiyo, and they're not removing it this turn. So if they remove this and Wasteland us, then they don't get to contribute any creatures to the board. So we're not going to be under pressure without any land straight away. I don't really want to go and get a white source until it's the right moment. If we're getting non-basics. I'm just going to start jamming these Urza Sagas until our opponent has had enough. A Brazen Borrower. Sure. We win the late game. That's what our deck does here. So, yeah, if you want to slow the game down, I'm happy about that. We just need to not get greedy. I think we got a little bit greedy in round 1 with how we were approaching our various options. Right, so I think we're just going to play the Saga. We could hold up the Bowmasters. Or we could play out the Tamiyo around a daze. I prefer playing the Tamiyo out around a daze right now. Although we've got a little bit of lag again. And then we can just start cranking out the constructs. We might be getting a basic planes off of this Flooded Strand. But if we can get our Saga to get all of the counters off. Okay, so I was going to say, if we can strip all the counters off and go to the 3rd chapter and get ourselves a Pithing Needle, we can just stop getting hit by Wastelands, and then I'm okay to have a Tundra. No things committed to the board, so they might have things like Death Shadow they just don't have the access to. Okay, so now we're just totally fine on that front. So now we can hold up Tamiyo, Clue Cracks, as well as Orcish Bowmasters. I'd rather not Bowmasters into a daze, because what could our opponent have in hand that they haven't played? A daze. We haven't really given them a good choice for that yet. They could have some Death Shadows they just can't cast yet. They could have a Murktide they can't cast yet. And that's about it. That's kind of the downside with Death Shadow. It does have some pretty explosive stuff it can do, but it needs to work for all of its threats. It feels like it needs to play Okay. They have an Orcish Bowmasters. Am I trying to Bowmaster their Bowmaster now? Or do I want to wait till next turn? We can let our opponent untap here. Like I said, they'd probably have a daze. We don't need to get rid of the Bowmasters straight away because we're not intending to draw a bunch of cards. Like, we could have cracked the clue in response, but this is going to make our constructs bigger. It means that our first construct can't be killed by a Bowmaster, which is pretty relevant. I just don't feel the need to play into a daze here. If our opponent's not really pressuring us, I'd rather use our Bowmaster ping to kill the Borrower. I think we probably deploy this island. Although we do want to have multiple white sources actually, so I'll probably deploy this. I will... Do I need to clue here? It makes our constructs a lot bigger. And then we can... So they can... Okay, they're not going to borrow it into our obvious line here. Yeah, I didn't think our opponent would. So we had the potential Bowmaster we could do there. I was just curious to see what our opponent would do with this Brazen Borrower. Are they going to play at end step? They are. It's interesting they didn't want to block our Tamiyo. I think I would rather get a construct up and running now, and then we can deal with the Borrower in a bit. Our opponent doesn't have any reach in their deck. They have to connect, so we can just clean up creatures and be alright. I don't want to waste a plow on the Borrower. If we resolve this Bowmaster, it's so savage. But our opponent might have removal. This is too juicy a target. This has got to be a bait. You wouldn't just crack this into this up mana. But if they have removal and they spend it on our construct, is that good or bad for us? We can make a large creature right now, or we can just slam this Bowmasters. Okay, I think I'm being baited here. I'm going to slam this and then we can Meticulous Archive. This is worthy of a Force of Will if they have one. And if we're just trading 2 for 1, that works for me. What is more important for me to nail here? I think it's more important to nail the Bowmasters, and then if we get to ping them off of this Brainstorm, then we can take out their other creatures. We just want to unlock our card draw again. If we get to ping off this Brainstorm, then I think this game is basically over. They have a Petty Theft. So I could try and Brainstorm. We don't have any counter magic in the deck. That's fine. This just unlocks a Bowmasters, stops our opponent's turn, just lets us continue doing what we're doing. Alright, so they've just bounced a removal spell for their Borrower into our hand. We've got Staff the Storyteller as well, which is pretty savage here. We get to go and get our Pithing Needle, so we don't have to worry about Wasteland after this turn. I don't think they've played a land yet, though, so they might be able to play a Wasteland. Right, so they can attack us for 3. We got loads of life to work with. Happy trade this Orc Army off for their Orc Army. Alright, they didn't fancy it. Because their resources that deal damage are more important than ours. Let's go and get this Meticulous Archive. Let's get Surveil on. Another white source. Yes, I would like another white source. So this pops. Am I making a construct here? If we make a construct, we don't get to make a Bowmasters. I think we're just floating mana here. Weird Saga, this one. We get the Pithing Needle. I'll name Wasteland. I'll play another white source here. I will... Is it more important to make sure that our Borrower hits? Sorry, our Bowmasters hits? Or do you just want to get this staff up and running? I think we want to get the Bowmasters in here. Because we're thinking about days this whole time. Right, let's just take out their Borrower. We can go and get ourselves another clue. We can start cracking these clues soon. Actually, we can just probably flip the Tamiyo is also fine here. Whilst there's no Bowmasters to be fearful of. And we... Oh, nearly cast the wrong one there. And we also don't need to worry about ploughing anything this turn coming. We can wait till the next turn. We don't need another Tamiyo. That can go away. We can probably just bury one of the lands. We can plus this. Alright, we are in a very commanding position. We've got a lot of resources on the go. We've got 2 removal spells, which are basically the most important cards in this matchup. Little 1/1s aren't going to do anything. We can put some 1/1 blockers in play. I don't know how our opponent is supposed to win this game. Honestly, just take a look, opponent. Just take a look. Like, we could Brainstorm to protect our hand, but we could just leave this Brainstorm in our hand and have a Brainstorm. Because then we can see what our opponent takes, and then we can go and get some stuff. But I imagine they'd probably take the staff here. That feels like it's going to be very difficult for them to beat. But 2 Plows and a Brainstorm with a Tamiyo ticking up also is going to be very difficult for them to beat. So I don't really know what their solution to this is. Maybe we'll get one of the classics. Thought seize you and then concede the game. I've certainly done it myself enough times. Just thought seize people and go, okay, can't beat that. GG's. Don't believe we're getting attacked here. So they could fire in a Bowmaster to grow this into a 2-2, but it'll only be a 1-2. So they would have to ping the Bowmaster at our Orc army, which means our Bowmaster lives, which I don't think is acceptable. A Ponder into our Bowmaster. This isn't a mistake. This is because this is something our opponent has to do because the position we put them in is so bad. I think this is how the sort of tempo matchup should generally feel for us. The problem with the previous round is, well, I guess the problem with this round for our opponent is actually all their threats are things they have to work for. They don't get to just play good cards. They have to, they have to put the cards in the graveyard for their Murktide. They have to work up their life total. Oh, we don't need to kill this yet. We know what's on top of our library. I'm just going to go and get a Tundra here. I guess we'll just keep plus into this. I'm going to plow this Tamiyo. We've got 2 plows. That's a fine place to be. Let's just attack. Why didn't it? I clicked the Bowmaster. I'm sure I did. I'm just having a lot of lag troubles today. We don't have another source we can fetch that taps for white. Actually, no, that's not true. We do. We have the... I think we're just going to... We have the Scrubland. I'm just going to crack one of these clues now before we have to worry about Bowmaster. Just take it easy on ourselves. A Teferi Time Raveler. Another excellent card to have. Shuts off all of our opponent's instant speed interaction. Means that all our removal spells just will connect every time. You can also use this to bounce our own permanents that can then incur more card advantage down the line. Engineered Explosives, X equals 1. Sure. This can take out our Tamiyo. But they're still under the gun for a bunch of stuff. The Pithy Needle going is a shame as well. But I can live with that. We've got 2-turn clock here. I will deploy this to Teferi. I will attack. I'll plus with the Teferi. And I will pass the turn. We can ponder at our leisure here. If we ponder and miss a land, then that'll be kind of annoying. So I'm just going to hold up what we've got here. We don't have to worry about Bowmasters anymore because we can respond and know everything's fine. They're going to 2 life. We get to ping them for 1. And that is the end of the game. That felt like an absolute slaughter there. So pretty happy with how the deck performed that one. Pretty happy with how I performed in comparison to the previous game. But yeah, I think this tempo deck where it also has extra hoops to jump through is going to be very easy for us. The tempo decks where they don't have those hoops as much, they get to play more of their own threats that just kind of do their thing, is going to be a little bit trickier for us. And our Swords of Plowshares aren't going to be as stellar as they are in this matchup. They're obviously still going to be great. So I imagine this matchup is easier than the previous one, but I think we still should have won the first round if we'd have played better. All right, that is 2 rounds down. Let's keep trucking. All right, we're into round 3. We can play like a little Urza Saga game. We've got some Brainstorm to find some stuff. A little bit of removal. This hand is fine. Our opponent's mulligan to 5, so they might be doing something that requires very specific cards, which is more likely to be a combo deck. So we might be having to Brainstorm looking for our Force of Wills. We only have 4 Force of Wills, so it's not a particularly likely hit. But it might be something we have to do to stop ourselves losing the game. Alright, our opponent just drew a card and passed. It's kind of terrifying, isn't it? Okay, I think we're going to ponder here. I think this is in any order and shuffle. That was exactly what we were looking for. If our opponent is not playing out any lands, they're probably going for like one big burst turn to do something busted. I think I want to get this Urza Saga running so we can just pressure our opponent rather than trying to do some more cantripping stuff. We just need to try and get this game won, I think, while our opponent is not able to do anything. Or while they're looking for their final pieces or whatever. Got the Saga running. And we'll pass a turn. I'm just going to play out a Swamp here. just start making these things. We're probably going to get our graveyard hate piece from the Saga because our opponent could be some sort of graveyard-based deck. A Lotus Petal. This is the turn where something happens. No, they're just playing cards out. Let's get a Construct. Let's get a Construct. Go Soulguide Lantern. We have to exile something. We'll get this. We'll go and fetch a Tundra here. And I will Prismatic Ending this Lotus Petal. We need to just interact in any way, shape, or form that we can. I would like some more information about what our opponent is playing. It could be something like Storm. It could be something like Oops All Spells. We just don't know. They didn't immediately scoop to Soulguide Lantern. But that might just be our opponent not wanting us to know that the Soulguide Lantern was the lock there. So what information do we have? Well, Thought Seizers are coming in. And I think we would also like the Force of Negations. The Consigns can hit fast mana, so these seem like a good shout as well. Deafening Silence is probably going to do some work. I don't think we want any of these other cards. If they're a Storm deck, maybe we want a Toxic Deluge to deal with the empty the Warrens that our opponent can have. It does not seem like a Source to Plowshares matchup. It also doesn't really feel like a matchup where we're going to have the most amount of time to grind stuff. So, what's our blue count looking like here? I suspect it's very high, which is something I do like about this deck. So we've got 20, plus we're bringing in another 6 cards. So we can afford to cut some blue cards if we want to. I'm thinking about the Tamiyo. It's probably going to be quite slow to do anything here. Like, when are we going to be able to cash in these cards? And it doesn't actually clock our opponent, so that's another reason I'm not interested in having that one. We're probably looking at something like one of these stars, because we're not going to have the most amount of time to drain the counters off this and get all the value. The other shot is something like Timeless Dragon here, but I think I quite like this setup. We can also fetch non-basics pretty comfortably. Double Force of Will against what looks like a very dedicated combo deck. I will keep this. If I just go Cabal Therapy, name Force of Will, then we're going to feel a little bit awkward. But we can sit on this Consigned Memory, and then we can play a Staff of Storyteller. It does attack our opponent's life total, not by a lot. It's not a thing we're amazing at doing, is clocking our opponent's life total. Once Upon a Time. Okay, this is not a card I was expecting to see out of our opponent. We might have sideboarded very wrong here. Boggart Trawler. Okay, no, they are Oops All Spells. We're okay. We're getting Thoughtseize. There is a Dark Ritual. We can afford to hit a Thoughtseize here if our opponent has it. Okay. Let's hit this, pitching the Brainstorm, please. They might have a Pact of Negation here. They did not. Okay. Blue card would be great. We did not draw a blue card. I will deploy this Flooded Strand because this can go and get us a Meticulous Archive, or it can get us something to consign to memory with. We're probably going to have to put this consign to memory into the Force of Will, though. Agadeum tapped. Okay, that's probably a good sign for us. It's Meticulous Archive. A Plains. I don't think we want this. We would like another blue card. If we can hold up Consign and Force of Will, then I'm pretty happy about that situation. There is another blue card. I will deploy this Scrubland and pass. Next turn we can deploy the Staff while still holding up the Consign. We just need to make sure that we keep enough action to stop our opponent's action. I'm not going to cycle this because I'd rather have a blue card, and we already have our next land. A Deafening Silence. That is a very good one here. I think that is better than playing anything else. Next turn we can play the Staff. I think we have enough stuff that statistically we're odds on to win this one. Let's get this Staff out. So we can either consign or draw a card. This is our only spell for the turn because of our own Deafening Silence. But we need to interact on our opponent's turn. Right, so they are just Force of Vigoring, pitching another Force of Vigor. Sure. We still get our 1-1, so we still got a clock. We've got another Staff coming. We still have access to the Consign or the Force of Will here. Or both, in fact. Attack. I don't think we need to Brainstorm here. If we Brainstorm and miss on a land, that's going to suck. So we're just going to get the Staff down. This gives us double the amount of pressure. And then we can obviously draw a card with the Staff. But we need to hold up the Consign as well as having the Force of Will ready to go. A Thought Seize. So we could Brainstorm and hide our hand. Do I think this is our opponent going off this turn? Or is this our opponent just trying to snipe away at our hand a little bit? I think we let this hit. Because if this is the turn they're going off, because they've been very disciplined without using Thought Seizers so far, this might have been kept in hand. Okay, they got rid of the Consign. Right, I would like to draw an extra card, please. A Retrofitter Foundry. That certainly has some text here. Let's attack. I think we are looking at just playing the Retrofitter Foundry here. Because this can get us more pressure and give us a 4-turn clock instead of a 6-turn clock. And obviously it can scale up, it can draw us more cards, get us more interaction with our opponents. Make a friend. Trigger the staff. Wouldn't mind just drawing a natural land drop. That would not be the worst thing in the world for us. An Orcish Bowmasters. Alright, that gives us more pressure we can add. We're just holding up. So if we draw lands, we get to Brainstorm. We can Brainstorm on our opponent's turn. But I think this play is going to be Orcish Bowmasters and just draw a raw card. The more cards we have, the better our Brainstorms become. Because we have more cards to throw back. So we actually have our opponent on a much quicker clock than they think because of this Bowmaster sat in our hand. So we can put our opponent to 7 here, and then we attack for 5. If we can draw a Bowmasters here, we can win the game. Prismatic Ending. I think it's worth casting this Brainstorm now, because if we find a Bowmasters, we can win the game 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then it adds 1 to the power of this, and it pings them for 1. So it's worth Brainstorming, because we might be able to close the game right now. Also, we found a land. Okay, so we found the Bowmasters that we wanted. We'll put back some stuff we don't care about right now. Put our land in case we need more land. Just play this out. Just ping our opponent down. And this is lethal. 2, 3, 4, 5. Wait, is this lethal? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No, this isn't lethal. What am I talking about? This puts our opponent to 1. Oh, that was just a horrible play then. Why did I think that was lethal? What is wrong with my maths today? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah. Alright. Maths is hard, I guess. So we have Brainstorm into more action if we need to. I might have been factoring in the body of the Bowmasters. It doesn't matter, we managed to win that game anyway, but that last play was not necessary. We should have just kept up more mana so we could cantrip at instant speed. So what we could have done if we had our mana up is Brainstorm, put the Force of Will on top, and then draw it with the Staff of Storyteller after they've duressed us or whatever. So that last turn, I'm not happy with how I played that one. Just some bad maths here. Alright, let's go to round 4. Okay, we can play on some basics, but again, we've got a little bit of tension here. We can try and just go island, swamp, and then cycle for our plane. So we have options here. This is worth keeping. We've got some interaction. Misty Rainforest. I think we fetch out the Flooded Strand, because if, in case there's some sort of weird emergency, we need a plains right away. We can go and plow our opponent's creature. Misty Rainforest. So I could get some non-basics and just play on non-basics this game. This would mean getting the Meticulous Archive out of the way now. We haven't seen any Wastelands yet. Our opponent's mana base could be something like a like Lorien Bug Beans, whatever. I suspect they have Wastelands, but they are an 80-card deck. Alright, I think I'm going to fire off and get the Meticulous Archive here. I think I'll just put this Timeless Dragon into the graveyard. Skip one of the steps of that one. Am I worried about something like a Daze here? Out of a Lorien deck? I don't think so. Especially since they're not doing anything so far. I think we just get a Tundra here. Or no, probably get an Underground Sea. But then what does this land fetch? That becomes the tricky part. I think we get a Scrubland. I just want to get this Staff of Storyteller in. Our opponent might be able to do some sort of leyline binding type stuff here. So our opponent might be a bigger control deck than us. So I'll have to wait and see what the deal is here. Xander's Lounge. Just can get a Tundra and allow them to leyline binding. Okay, just a Meticulous Archive. But they're going to have all their types available for them. So by playing this out now, it means that when we start doing Orcish Bowmaster stuff, we're going to put a counter on this. So it's going to make our Orcish Bowmasters be even better in cantrip for us. Hedge Maze, sure. This is definitely a different route that you could take control at the moment. I think it might be too slow for the current metagame to play something like this, but I think it might be quite good against what we're doing, because we are playing a relatively slow list. Here is the Leyline Binding that we suspected. So we're going to lose the Staff of Storyteller, unfortunately. And this is not something we get to remove unless we Teferi it. But our opponent doesn't have an engine in like up the beanstalk or anything. Okay, so we can Brainstorm into Orcish Bowmasters if we wish. Let's get a little bit of damage going. Let's fire off this Brainstorm. I like the Staff. I don't mind the Force because we might have to fight over something relatively soon. Would I rather get a Bowmasters in or the Staff? Do we need both lands? We probably don't need both lands. Probably put back a Timeless Dragon and a Polluted Delta here. Let's crack this. We can go and get an Underground Sea. Just round out our colours. And I will deploy the Staff here. We can fight over something using Force of Will here. I don't believe we're going to fight over making this. Okay. If our opponent's fighting over this, maybe we fight back. Like, this is obviously going to be worth more cards to us. So this is a bit like trying to force to get your Beanstalk through. You want your engine. If our opponent had a Beanstalk, we probably would have seen it by now. So I think this is worth doing. Okay, a Brainstorm from our opponent. Okay, they've got a fetch land to follow up that Brainstorm with. And a Prismatic Ending on our Staff of Storyteller. Unfortunate. And a land. I don't mind that. That gives us access to this Timeless Dragon if that's what we want to do. Or we could hold up this Orcish Bowmasters as an answer to potential Beanstalk shenanigans. We also don't want to overcommit. Our opponent probably has 3-ish Terminus in their deck, or some combination of Terminus and Supreme Verdict. But if we can make them trade real cards for any of our Spirit tokens, that's pretty solid there. So we've already had to trade real cards just for the Staff. Now, it's definitely a shame we didn't get to draw any cards off our Staff. But so be it. We don't have any additional Surveil lands, so I don't really want to get going with that. We want to land out. This represents high-cast Force of Will. Something like an Endurance might be a thing we have to plow if they have one of those. But if we can just keep chipping our opponent down, they're going to need a draw engine to get ahead in this game, and we can shut that down a little bit with the Bowmasters. That's a very tempting time to Bowmasters. I don't think this is where we actually fire the Bowmasters in, because this could just be a setup turn to put a Terminus and deal with both of these at once. And yes, we get to ping them for 3, but then we lose our Bowmasters. It's more important to have this game object around. We just need to make our opponent expend their resources on the little chip shots that we're doing. Because if we commit a real card and then they can just answer one form with our real card, they clean up these as well. And this is all about a game of attrition and the use of resources. Now, at some point, they're going to have access to this Lorien in their command zone, or whatever it's called, companion zone. And that's going to be a thing we're going to be using our Source to Plowshares on. Right, as they set up a Terminus here, let's find out. They're cycling the Spire's headquarters. Okay. So I have not set up a Terminus, unless they've set up another card down. Okay, so they wanted one of the cards off that Brainstorm. Okay, so they're going to put the Force of Will on top of their library. I think this means we're firing in the Bowmasters now. The times, they have changed. If they target the Terminus there, that's obviously a thing that we would hit. So we have missed out on a big chunk of damage. But we're just trying to play around our opponent's resources. But if they are drawing a thing that doesn't deal with our guys. Life from Below, Misty Rainforest, Spire's Headquarters. Okay, so none of these cards do anything. They just lands. And we're representing a big crack of damage here. Not quite lethal in 2 turns, but close. Maybe what's going to happen here? We're going to see another Misty Sanctuary? We are. They're going to put this Terminus on top now. Have they got a way of drawing it now? Like a Brainstorm. So this is the situation I didn't want to play the Bowmasters for. I wasn't expecting the second Sanctuary out of our opponent. Here we are. Teferi Time Raveler, you say. Right, let's do some attacking. So we know they've got a Force of Will in their hand. They can't hardcast it. So do they have the ability to pitch cast it right now? That's something we're going to have to find out. They've got 2 lands and a Force of Will in their hand. Let's see if this Teferi sticks, because this shuts down Miracled cards. Okay, so they did have the Force of Will pitching Lorien Revealed. So they've got 2 lands, and they've got this Terminus on top. So they'll shred these, we'll untap, we'll play the Timeless Dragon, and that'll be a 1-turn clock they're going to have to answer. We're leaving this land in hand so that we can brainstorm it back on into our deck and turn it into a real card. The plan with the Teferi was to consider bouncing the Leyline Binding and getting a card out of the staff and another threat. But mainly it was just to shut off the Terminus. So our opponent is going to draw this Terminus and miracle it and kill these guys. We just need to connect once with our guy when they're drawing off the top. Now they do have access to Life from Loam. I don't think they're going to have a 3rd Mystic Sanctuary. It's certainly possible, but it's not something I particularly want to happen. A Terminus, what a surprise. Well, only one of those actually goes on the bottom, so it doesn't matter on the order. I'm probably going to shuffle before we get there anyway. Cycling the Spyro's Headquarters. Interesting they're doing that instead of getting the Urien in hand. Because they could have put the Urien in hand, we play our guy, they put the Urien into play. Now they're going to need to draw a land so they can play both. I can't remember if they've got a land in hand or not right now. I don't think we know what their last card is. Okay, so now they're just putting the Urien into hand. They have enough mana to do everything. Sure. So the extra card of the Urien from being a Urien deck appears to be making a difference here. Let's get this Timeless Dragon in. What do we have left to fetch in our deck? I think we need to fetch one of these first. Okay, so we can get a Tundra. We don't have any black lands we can fetch left in our deck with the fetch lands we have, right? So we'll eternalize this. So we got a 4/4. They can play a Urien. Then they're very unlikely to blink this Leyline. So we can just snap off a card. Life from the Loam. So they've got like a little draw engine going with the Spyro's Headquarters. But it's quite expensive for what it is. So here comes the Bird Serpent. We can remove this. So we have a choice to make here. We can fire off the Bowmasters. That'll put our opponent to 2 life. We plow this, they go up to 6 life, but then we have exactly lethal. I think that is worth attempting, provided I can do maths. We've already established I'm not very good at maths today. Alright, they're scooping it up. I guess this is also lethal just by attacking as well, right? Because they block this and they take 2. So it's lethal in 2 different ways. Okay, I would like some Thought Seizers, please. I would like another threat. And then we get into a little bit of a interesting situation. Like, how many forces do we want in a matchup like this? How easily can we blow up their beanstalks? So basically, we had engine cards that our opponents spent cards on. They gave us a little bit of extra stuff that then had to spend some more cards on. They never got their engine up and running. So do we want Force of Negations? They are easier to hardcast than a Force of Will, and they hit basically all the things we care about. 1-for-1 stuff is clearly going to be better than Forces, but maybe using the Forces to push through a Timeless Dragon is pretty handy. The Solar Lantern cantrips, and it stops them from having access to Mystic Sanctuaries, which is kind of an annoying thing that our opponent does. Is that enough to make me keep this Solar Lantern, or am I just going to play through the Mystic Sanctuaries? I think I'm just going to play through them. So we'll trim on Force of Wills and just have a couple in there. That seems alright to me. Consign to Memory is an interesting one because it counters the trigger of Urien. It also counters the triggers of Leyline Binding. And it can counter the trigger of Up the Beanstalk, but that doesn't feel great because then you're trading for less than a card with your spell there. Being a 1-for-1 answer against Leyline Binding is nice, but we don't care about Leyline Binding that much because our stuff is quite cheap and has abilities going on anyway. Maybe that's something that we want if we're going to lean heavily into doing Tamiyo things. I think I like this setup here. Just try and get some card draw going off of the staff. We've got a Teferi that our opponent will probably have to make sure it doesn't come into play because that will ruin a lot of their plans of playing around in our turn with various counter spells and flash removal spells and potentially flash threats. We don't really know the full composition of our opponent's deck. The sort of big Lorien control decks haven't been a thing for a while, so it's not like there's a consistent list that people are playing. Island Ponder or Island Tamiyo. They've made us play first. That is very unusual. I'll keep this. Our opponent almost certainly has Wasteland, so I think we have to go and fetch a basic island here. But we have a lot of cantrips to find our next land. So we're going to try and play on basics if we can. And because we're on the play, because our opponent decided for us to be on the play, we're going to get this Tamiyo down, which might be a thing that they can't answer until it's at least got one clue. And that's just one extra resource that we have. Can't remember the last time my opponent put me on the play. Alright, here's a Tamiyo. How do you feel about this? Yeah, okay. We got 2 for 1 straight away on turn 1. Not bad. Little 1 mana hymn to Turak. I'll take it. Arab Mesa. They probably got some pretty weird looking fetch land selections in their deck because they are 5 colours. Alright, I would like to cast a Ponder, please. We are looking for another land. We found a land. It's a pretty good one, but I don't like the other cards that much. Do I take the guaranteed land that doesn't actually make much of a difference for us, or do I just go for a shuffle? I think this is in any order on a shuffle. Okay, we missed on the land. So we had 5 draws to find a land. We didn't find it. We have Brainstorms, but our opponent's probably going to be quite aggressive at targeting them with stuff now, because they know that we're struggling for mana. But our opponent is a 5-colour deck that gets to play Wastelands, which is wild to me. Oh, the Beanstalk. Yep, so our opponent is probably going to run away with this game now, because they've got an engine in play and we don't have anything going on really. Okay, land. We could get our own engine in, but if our opponent has a Force of Will, their Force of Wills are way better than ours are in this matchup. We're just going to go get ourselves a basic Plains here. Then we're going to get the Staff down. So our opponent Force of Wills this. Okay, they didn't Force of Will it, so we both have an engine running. And they're both similar in terms of what they do. Ours requires us to pay 1 to draw cards. Our opponent requires them to have specific things. But we have a way of just constantly topping this up with the Retrofitter Foundry. The Wandering Emperor is pretty good too. Double Staffs is really gross. So I'm pretty happy with the situation we're in. I wasn't expecting this to resolve. So that is something. But we could just see it get Leyline Binding really soon. And that'll be a cantripping Leyline Binding, and we're just going to be falling further and further behind at that point. Considering the amount of lag I've been getting in this league, I'm a bit worried trying to play a game for time as well. It's also not the most enjoyable thing to watch as an audience member, just someone trying to nickel and dime their opponent so that their clock runs down. I suspect their big finisher is going to be Fourth Eolingus. They might have an Uro in their deck as well. Are we going to get to untap with a Staff? That's really big news if we do. We'd have loved to have seen a white source there. Alright, we've got a Force of Will for the potential Orcish Bowmaster. I don't know if our opponent's running that though. I haven't seen it yet. It looks like the black is just a splash, but we'll find out. Red Elemental Blast. Okay, I'm going to draw a card here. Okay, that's fine. We found our next land anyway. Let's attack. I think because our opponent just goes bigger than us, we are supposed to play this Retrofitter's Foundry and just go big. Oh, we need to crack this fetch test, don't we? This can also get us a black land so we can play around the Wasteland. We will need to find a second white source for this Wandering Emperor. And by playing this out, it means we don't have a white mana. We don't have a second white mana for doing a white spell plus activation of Staff, which is something I'm repeatedly noticing playing this deck is we don't necessarily have the mana to activate the Staff if we're playing on basics. And we've been trying to play on basics quite a lot. Maybe we're just supposed to ignore that and not play on the basics. But our opponent is a Life from the Loam Wasteland deck, so we do need to respect that. Would like to find a white mana source, please. Did not find a white mana source. I'll attack with a Spirit token. And then we're just going to be generating tokens and drawing cards here. I think given that we don't have much in the way of mana, I think I'm going to generate a token and draw now in case we find a land. and just get our land drops out. This does mean we're going shields down on playing Bowmaster. Are they going to... I don't think they can play a Force of Vigor in their deck. We get our Staff the Storyteller charged up. We'll draw a card with it. Another Bowmasters. Well, they're very good cards in the matchup. Going to be a little tricky to deploy them, but we'll see what happens. Just cycling Aspira's headquarters. Sure. We have that Force of Will for that one scary thing. We don't need things like Brainstorms anymore because we have an actual draw engine instead of just a selection engine. There's the wasteland that we've been playing around this whole time. We're going to see a Lorien to hand. We're going to see an Uro. Sure. That 3 life undoes a lot of the damage we've been trying to put down. Maybe we're supposed to keep this Soulguide Lantern in just because of the Uro. They're getting back a Red Blast. Would have loved to have had the Orcish Bowmasters here. And we still have our plows in so we can deal with like the threats like Uro. That's how I would rather deal with this rather than using the Soulguide Lantern. Maybe that's wrong, but I think it's pretty reasonable. So they've got the Red Blast in hand. So this Force of Will, no good. We could maybe try and bait the Red Blast by casting a Brainstorm, but that only works if we draw another blue card. And we're getting another little spike of lag here, which is a bit awkward for us. Flooded Strand, love to have some more mana. This can be a white source for the Wandering Emperor. We're definitely playing it out. I think I'm going to get this Staff the Storyteller number 2 in. And then we can get a basic planes. So we're going to feel the power of having a load of basics this game. A Stifle, you say? Yeah, that's fine. We're going to charge it up in a second anyway. We won't plan on drawing a card with it this turn because we want to get the Bowmasters in and start making their Uro hurt them a little bit. And then we can try and make them fight over this, and then we can just slam the Wandering Emperor in over the top after it taps. So they're going to hold up the Red Blast so they can Red Blast our Force of Will, so we can't Force of Will the Uro, but that's fine. That's not our plan here. Shove this in and grow. Maybe when we made the Retrofitter's token earlier, because we didn't want to commit stuff to the board for sweepers, we should have been committing Bowmasters before. But now we got a bunch of Staff of Storyteller popping off here. You get to ping them again. The actual Beanstalk is slightly problematic for them because it is a mandatory draw trigger, so they have to pump our guys if they cast any spells. Well, they haven't got anything really off of this Beanstalk yet. Can we resolve our Wandering Emperor? That is the real question. This Force of Will is useless, which is a good reason why I boarded it down in the matchup. They've got access to Pyroblasts. It's a nice thing to have sometimes. Having a couple of them in the deck means we can usually sculpt away from them if we need to. More Bowmasters. All right, we have a creature with flying, so that's going to come over. Get our 1 point of damage in. And then we can Wandering Emperor this Uro if we wish. We could just play another Bowmasters and just outscale this Uro. Right, what we're going to see here is it's going to be Lorien to hand. The One Ring. Not a fan of that one. Alright, Bowmasters it is. Do we play the Bowmasters now, or do I just go for this Wandering Emperor? I think it's the Wandering Emperor and just exile it. You can't Pyroblast this. This resolving is kind of a big deal. Trading for the Uro doesn't feel good, but the Wandering Emperor actually exiling the Uro and taking it away forever is pretty good news. I hope they're looking at that Red Blast in their hand going, oh, this sucks. Alright, we're in. We have seen a Stifle from our opponent. I don't think they're going to be running multiple Stifles though. Go away, Uro. Alright, we got rid of the Uro. We have Bowmasters here. This will ping our own Bowmasters because we can't target them because of the One Ring. But I'm pretty happy with this situation we find ourselves in. I'm going to stack up a counter on the Spirit token, so we've got a fly that's a little bit larger. But we have double Bowmasters keeping this One Ring in check. Are they putting the Lorien to hand? They are, okay. I can live with that one. So there's no attacking our opponent this turn. Another black source is really handy for where we are right now. We'll pump up this Spirit token. Deploy this. I think we can afford to draw one card here. Wowzers trousers. I hope you like Bowmaster's opponent. Yeah, this is probably going to get out of hand quite quickly. Like, the One Ring's going to be burning them down. Our creatures are going to be attacking them. If they tap this One Ring, they're going to have a really rough time. Bowmasters, please. A Force of Will. Let's go and get this Underground Sea and play another Bowmaster. We don't have a second swamp, so it has to be something like an Underground Sea. I guess we could get this Scrubland. They're probably just going to waste whatever we get here is the problem. So we just get this Underground Sea. So now we get to punish the draw from the Beanstalk as well. Again, this Force of Will does nothing here. These will charge up our staffs as well. Our opponent says, I will report Yoru cheat to Wizards of the Coast. That's pretty salty. Alright, well, we beat that person. And they're nice and salty, so happy that we did. We are 4 rounds in. We are currently 3-1. And the one round we lost is one I think that we definitely could have won if we approached it a little bit differently. So let's go to the final round and see if we can stick a 4-1. This hand is fine. We can do a little bit of pondering. Keep this. If our opponent is playing a graveyard-centric deck, then we are kind of incentivized to play this Saga Lantern out first. But considering some of the most popular decks in the format right now are graveyard-based decks, I am considering playing the Saga Lantern out. And that way we keep our blue card for our Force of Will. So we're just covering our bases as much as possible. You can get Thought Seized. Just a ponder. They're going to hold up for an Entomb. I don't think they would go and get an Underground Sea if they were just going to pass a turn, though. I don't think playing around a mythical Stifle is worth it. Personal Tutor. Alright, so it's Doomsday, you're telling me. Is it better to fight over the Personal Tutor or the Doomsday? I think I'd rather fight over them casting the Doomsday, because that takes the Doomsday out of their deck. Also, this is a pretty cool art with a fun little owl friend. Big fan of birds. Okay. What are we doing here? I guess we want to play around days. So we're just going to play out this Flooded Strand. We don't have to worry about Wasteland now. We know the matchup, which is good. So we got Force of Will around days here. A Ponder. So they're probably looking for the Dark Ritual to get this up and running. So I think we go and try and select for more useful stuff here. Or we could just get this Saga running and just get this Underground Sea and have access to the Bowmasters. I think that makes a lot more sense, actually. We shouldn't have fetched when we did. Not that it matters, but we just get the Saga up and running. So we have a threat either way. So in other matchups where we don't expect our opponent to have an Orcish Bowmasters, I'd be more inclined to play it out first. The thing is, our opponent has to build a pile working around whatever we're doing. Orcish Bowmasters can skew that. Our opponent's very switched on to things that are happening. A Dark Ritual into a Doomsday, no doubt. Let's try and force around a days here. They have a force to go back. So if we ping our opponent, they go to 16. Then they lose half their life total and go to 8. If we don't ping our opponent, they lose half their life total rounded up. So they go to 8. So it makes sense to let this happen and not show our opponent the Bowmaster. So they build their pile not knowing there's a Bowmaster coming. Alright, let's see how long they take to make their pile. They're pretty switched on, so I think they will have an idea what they need to do. And they know the deck list we're playing, because they've also seen Marcus posting about it. So they're going to have ideas of the things that we're bringing to bear. Now, they don't know which of those things that we will actually have in our hand. But I suspect that they are quite likely to pick a line that's good against Bowmasters. Okay. A very quick pile here. Pretty standard looking list here. Let's pop it out and have a nice look at it. Do the things our opponent have matter right now for how we need to approach this game? Not particularly. They didn't put the spoils in, which is interesting. Okay, I'm going to fire off this Bowmaster's end step because we need to pressure our opponent's life total to make it harder for them to cycle through their pile. Yep. They're cycling with the Street Wraith. Have they got an answer? They're cycling with the Street Wraith. Yeah, the fact they have the Street Wraith in hand is a little bit awkward for us. They're going to put everything into their hand now. If we'd played this before the Doomsday, they wouldn't have been able to do that. But I did not expect them to have a Cycler in hand to start the pile off. Okay, so we need to draw another Bowmasters here. We've been pretty good at drawing Bowmasters today, so let's see if we can do that. Bowmasters, please. That's not a Bowmasters. But we can... this gets a Scrubland, doesn't it? So yeah, we can Brainstorm into a Bowmasters here. Double Bowmasters. Now if I can do the maths, this is lethal. Alright, we got the game. Whew. That was pretty tight there. Okay, so what would I like here? Consign Teferi can stop the trigger of a Thassa's Oracle. That is a relevant piece of text. Thought Seizers are obviously fantastic. The Deafening Silence is a weird one. It means that we can sometimes stop them from going off with certain piles. This is kind of like a maybe. I think the Force of Negations are obviously the better hit here. I don't want the Plows for this matchup. The Teferi is great. We do not require Soul Lantern. I think if we start grinding out with Retrofitter Foundry, something's gone very weird with the game. I think we're probably looking at trimming a couple of Tamiyos here. Like Tamiyo's something we can play turn 1 and start accruing advantage, but we have to then spend our mana cracking this. I don't know if that's really worth it. I think we need to just pressure our opponent's life total with the things that we're putting on the board. So we'll trim a couple of Tamiyos. You could think about trimming some stars, but they at least put some damage into your opponent. We're going to keep the Prismatic Endings in case they play out something like a Petal or a Lion's Eye Diamond, then we can snatch that one away. And maybe if they've got some little pivot, like Bowmasters or whatever, we at least have a little bit of removal to go with it. Alright, we'll try this. This is a weird one. We have no Force of Will. We do have a Concise Memory. We have to spend mana to get our next land. So this would be a turn 1 Saga, cycle this, go and get an island. I think we can do better. Okay, this looks better to me. We can keep this. I'm a little bit reluctant to keep a second as a Saga, but it's kind of a tricky choice. I want to keep all of our blue cards. I want to keep the Staff. Yeah, I think it's a Saga that goes here. Now, if we don't draw any lands, then it's obviously going to be a bad time for us. Oh, it's nice playing Doomsday because you get to be one of the few decks where it's correct to just play an island and cast Brainstorm on turn 1. Not many decks can say that. Storm decks and Doomsday is about it. Also, very nice island. Love the Mirage artwork. Clearly our opponent is a human being of wonderful taste. Thoughtseize. Okay, we're going to lose the Force of Will almost certainly here. We can try and ponder our way towards a new one. Yeah, Force of Will is gone. So we can deploy our Flooded Strand and ponder. I think we ponder off of a Tundra, given that we have a white card we want to cast on turn 2. Even though Bowmaster is one of the better cards in the matchup. Teferi is very strong here. But these aren't the interaction we want. I think we have to go any order here. Alright, so we found the land. I would have rather had a land that can get us black, just in case we draw the Bowmasters. But now we can play the Saga and put out the Staff, if we want to, as like a display of power. Because if we're not casting this Brainstorm they know about in our hand, it might make them think that we've got some more permission, and then we can just get a threat down. Alternatively, we can play the Saga and use this as our threat, and then also Brainstorm or Ponder. Again, Thoughtseize again. Okay, they're going right now. I don't think we get to beat this. Alright, Down Ritual into Cabal Ritual. Shouldered the Apocalypse. They do have a pivot plan. Very good. Very bad for us, but... Okay. Wouldn't mind to have that Teferi back. So this was a pivot plan that the Doomsday decks had a while back. They've kind of been off. And now it's back, apparently. I will play this, which does not hurt us. This gives us a chump block. It also gives us another artifact for our Saga, so we can try and challenge this Shouldered in combat. It's not really there for what it does in combat. Ponder from our opponent. This is going to gain them some life. Pretty sweet. So, do we chump block here? I think we do. This represents another turn down the line. And if we have to do some brainstorming... Yeah, you take these cantrips. I don't really want to cast them. I just want to make constructs. Now we can just pay 1 to draw a card off the Staff of Storyteller. If we want to. That's probably better than casting a Brainstorm here. There goes Shouldered, ruining our day. So we make a 2-2. Next turn they'll both be 4/4s. And then we can at least hold this at bay. Unless we draw the Retrofitter Foundry. We want to be able to tutor something with this. But we take a hit from this now. And then we take another 2 in our upkeep. So we're going to be taking 6, going to 9 before we get our constructs up and running. We don't have anything like a Shadow Spear to keep our life total high that way. Oh, look at all this extra life our opponent's gaining. It's beautiful. We love to see it. We don't love to see it, but just in general, I enjoy casting cantrips when I have a Shoulder of the Apocalypse. Let's make a friend. Look at all these delicious 2 damage to ourselves we can do. Okay. Oh, what is this? We're getting dressed down. No, okay. They're just fetching around Pithing Needle. They put Days in their graveyard, makes sense. Wait, we boarded out the Retrofitter Foundry, didn't we? Oh no. Okay, that is awkward. I think I'm going to play this Meticulous Archive. Consign to memory. I think we do not need this. I think we need Teferi and some card draw. So they can't attack with the Shoulder. It's only taking 2 damage a turn, unless they have a way of removing one of our constructs. But yeah, ordinarily, Shoulder is something that we, it's going to be good against us, but we're going to be just, finding our ways to remove it and moving on with our lives. But we've boarded in a way that it's going to be very difficult to answer this. But I did say that in the sideboarding phase, that I wasn't expecting the pivot from the Turbo Doomsday decks, because they haven't been running it for a while. Not the shouldered pivot. But here we are. I'm glad we won game 1 is all I'm going to say here. I wonder if they take this out for game 3. Maybe we can trim on some Consigned memories. Like, they do stop the Thassa's Oracle trigger. So we get round a Cavern of Souls line. So it is quite potent for stopping their Doomsday. But it loses a lot of other utility that some other cards could provide. Like, it's not helping us here very much. Like, we could stifle one of these. Okay, yeah. They can Thoughtseize us. They've got plenty of life to work with. Are you going to take the Ponder? Yeah, I think that's correct. Are you going to attack? No. They've got no cards in hand, and we'd happily snap that trade-off. Okay, deck. What do we have? A Force of Will that we can't use. I think we are in the Brainstorm phase of the game here. This puts us to 1 life. We got nothing. Okay, so maybe I want some Swords to Plowshares. Or maybe, it's Wandering Emperor, it feels very slow for that sort of effect though. Maybe we don't like the Tamiyos enough and we can take the Tamiyos out, have a couple of plows back in, maybe cool it on the pendings. Just have the answers for the shouldered going. It is annoying because our opponent can just ignore what we're doing. Because they can just go into their Doomsday half of their deck. And we can just be sat there with a bunch of plows. This is why it's an effective pivot. Obviously, we can just answer it with a plow. We don't know if they have other pivot creatures. They might have things like Barragoyf or Bowmasters. So I think it's worth boarding in the plows. If they've shown us they're willing to do a pivot plan in their deck, the chance of them having more stuff to go along with that plan is a bit higher. Alright, what does this hand do? We Thoughtseize, we Staff. Okay, so we probably go Scrubland, Thoughtseize, turn 2, Saga, Staff, turn 3, make a Construct. Pressure our opponent's life tail that way. I'm down to clown with this. Thoughtseize, Doomsday, Barragoyf, Dark Ritual. So we take the Doomsday, they turn on Barragoyf. I think that we're more set up to deal with the Barragoyf than we are a Doomsday right now. They might also consider Thoughtseizing and then trying to Dark Ritual on turn 2. No, they're going for the Dark Ritual right now. It is the Barragoyf, sure. Like I said, they have more stuff for their plan. Consign to memory. That's not really where I wanted to be right now. Do I want to deploy this Saga? What is the Saga doing for us right now? Are we going to make a construct out of it next turn? Probably not. So I think the plan is to play the Tundra and the Staff. We can chump block for a turn. They could daze here. That's going to be pretty strong. But we need to get through the stuff in their hand. Yep. So the chump block would be nice to stop them getting another creature. I think our opponent's just going to run us over. We'll see. Thoughtseize? Boom, there it goes. So we're going to lose the staff because this provides us with a stream of cards with the other stuff we have in hand. And now we're behind on making Saga constructs. Yeah, maybe we could have played that differently and just played the Saga out then so we could at least make constructs next turn, but the constructs aren't good enough for the Baraggoth. We need to just try and get some card draw going. No, I don't like how I've played this game. I don't think just playing the Saga wins us the game. But this way, anything we draw now, we are quite likely to be able to resolve. And we just kind of have to work through them making a 4-5 on turn 1. If we can just answer this though, it will be lights out. Because they're going to have to rebuild from nothing. They milled a bunch of cards. They didn't hit any creatures, so that's good for us. And Orcish Bowmasters. You know what Orcish Bowmasters likes to do? He likes to chump block for 2 turns in a row. I think... do I want to get this Meticulous Archive? We're just trying to dig our way towards cantrips and things that aren't for the Baraggoth. But I think we're going to play the Saga this time so we can play around another days. I think I'm just going to fire this off now. So our opponent can't untap and have cantrips in response or whatever. Alright, so we've got ourselves a creature. This creature goes to the graveyard. It does grow the Baraggoth, but we can chump block for a turn. Which we will be doing. Because this means additional Bowmasters will then give us another creature to chump block with. Cycling this grows their Baraggoth. They're just getting more and more life. I guess... it's not really a trade of life, actually, but it means on subsequent turns it's going to be a larger creature. Okay. Come on, deck. A Consign to memory. Not the one I wanted. Plains. That's also not what I want. Would I rather lose my Bowmasters or my Saga Construct? Saga Construct has more chance of killing the Baraggoth in the future. But I think we're going to be chump blocking with the Saga because I just don't want my opponent to be able to cantrip. We want to be able to find a way to kill this Baraggoth and then lock the game up from that point. We don't want our opponent gaining additional cards. Alright, so there's the Underground Sea that we saw earlier. Ooh, let's tap this for the correct thing, shall we? I would very much like to make a construct. Chump block, please. Another 5 life, you say? Enjoy. Oh, another Baraggoth. Why are you Baraggothing all the time? Force of Will. Very funny deck. Very funny. We don't have anything to fetch with this. Maybe we're supposed to put something into fetch here. Because this is kind of awkward just having this not fetching anything at all. But I do not feel good about this situation. If we'd have drawn this Force of Will the other way around with a Consign to memory, I'd still be okay now. So we could chump block this for another turn. This wouldn't be in play. But now we're just getting pummeled by these monsters. Can I afford to let them draw a card here? I think I can let them draw a card because we have the Force of Will. If they get like a shoulder, we can at least counterspell that. Nothing. Okay. Can we mill our opponent out? Not before we die. Okay. I think it's worth consigning the trigger there. Come on, deck. This does not work underneath this Baraggoth. Because if we take 6... we also can't Force of Will without dying now. This is bad. Okay, what fresh hell is this? If this is a Shouldred, we can't really afford to counterspell it. Because that will kill us. We block here. I think we have to consign the trigger. Because that makes Shouldred less likely. How do we get out of this? Bowmaster can block for a turn. But all we're doing is treading water here. We don't have a way to realistically get out of the situation we're in. We need to staff the Storyteller. Into this being a land that we can't use is really problematic. If we'd have had the Saga Lantern, it wouldn't have shrunk them very much because we've got a bunch of different types in our own. Okay. Another Force of Will. Let's kill ourselves with the Polluted Delta. Alright, we got minced there. So we finished the league with 3-2. I think the first game was pretty winnable. Like the The final game, though, the final round, was definitely a difficult one for us because of the pivot plan was just so effective. And I think we'll talk about the deck and we'll explain why that is the case. So control decks, generally speaking, they're very good at answering stuff if they know what they're answering, right? If you know that you don't have to worry about some sort of combo plan and you can just index into a load of removal like we did against like Death Shadow, where you just strip out your counter spells and just have all this sweet one from removal and card advantage, that's great. Or if you're against like a spell-based combo deck, you go, okay, I don't need this janky removal, I can smash in a load of counter magic. But then you get into situations where your opponent can present both of those things to you. So you need to have access to both parts of your deck, and you also need to draw the right stuff at the right time, which is not the easiest thing in the world to do. So we sort of got undone by that in the Doomsday matchup at the end, because we couldn't answer their creatures. Even when we brought in the 4 plows, like, are we supposed to mulligan to plow? That sounds like a horrible idea. Like, the general strategy, I think, should be to answer Doomsday first, because Doomsday will kill you quicker than just creatures, and then try and Brainstorm ponder your way in, but we just didn't have any of that and just couldn't get where we needed to go. So, yeah, I don't think we played that round particularly well, but I think we were also massively under the gun on that one, and it was always going to be difficult. So how do I feel about this deck? I think it's pretty solid. I think it's I wouldn't feel embarrassed playing this in a high-level tournament. There are a few things that bother me with it that I think could be addressed, perhaps. So we have got, let's just put all the basics in one pile, shall we? So we are trying to play on basics a fair amount of the time, but we're also trying to have a lot of white mana to do Staff of Storyteller stuff, as well as, you know, casting plows in certain matchups alongside activating Staff of Storyteller. We're trying to cast Orcish Bowmasters as well, and we're basically just splashing for the Bowmasters, right? So our mana is kind of odd in that respect. Like, you know, sometimes we're also bringing in the Thoughtseize or the Toxic Deluge, so we have a little bit more than just the Bowmasters, but we're mainly just playing for the Bowmasters. And obviously the Bowmasters was a very powerful card and flat out managed to win us a bunch of games, and that's pretty sweet. But the mana consideration here means that if we want to cast Bowmasters on curve, we're quite often having to either limit the rest of our turns because we get the swamp, or we expose ourselves to Wasteland. And that is kind of awkward because it undoes this whole we've got a bunch of basics we can play on basic strategy and turns it into, okay, we are in a situation where we're maybe not going to be able to maximize our card advantage in a turn, right? So we're not going to be able to crack Staff of Storyteller as much as we want to because we fetched a swamp to Bowmasters our opponent. And it also means we only have one Tundra in the deck. And that was a card that I multiple times wanted to reach for a second copy of. Like either our first one got wastelanded or whatever. I think we don't need to be playing 5 basics. I think I would probably swap this island for a Tundra just to have a second Tundra that we can reach for. This is the one I wanted to reach for the most. And it also gives us another white pip for Staff of Storyteller. Because we don't really need blue-blue, but white-white in a lot of turns is something we want access to. We have, you know, things that actually cost white-white. But then, you know, Staff of Storyteller plus something else is something we constantly wanted to do. So I think that is definitely a change I would like to make with the mana base. Maybe, you know, play this a few more times and then you get a bit more information about it. And then you can work out exactly what it's supposed to look like. I know Marcus is a skilled magician who's built this deck. But me just going in right away and playing one league with it, that is something that concerns me a little bit. I think when you're trying to play one of these decks with these basic lands, it's sometimes a burden that isn't worth it. And what I mean by that is sometimes you can be playing on these basics and you are making your mana base more stable, but the tempo hit you take or the ability to multi-spell in a turn or multi-activate in a turn, that being lost can be worse than the threat of a wasteland sometimes. And what's even worse is sometimes you go for all these hoops and then your opponent just saying Micah spawns you anyway, and you just can't do anything about it because they can hit basics with that. So I definitely like having access to basics. I don't know how many we need, whether it's 3, 4, or 5. I'm leaning more towards 4, but that's just something to consider and be aware of if you are playing this deck. Also, you know, the extra white pips, it gives you another land that you can find. Sorry, the extra planes here over an island in the form of another Tundra. It gives you another thing you can search up for with Timeless Dragon. Timeless Dragon was very medium today. I did feel like closing games out was sometimes a little bit tricky for us. if we had, you know, some like big Murktide level threats, we could just dump a big creature. Obviously, we're just trying to incrementally advantage our way through this game, and this is kind of like our Murktide-esque creature, but this obviously stacks up very poorly into a lot of the bigger threats out there, like Murktide region itself. So that's something I would also be concerned about. The Force of Will count here, we don't have that many counterspells. A lot of the decks that are playing counterspells right now have access to about 7-ish in the main deck. They're usually running Force of Wills and some Daisies, and you will sometimes see some of the blue-white centric control decks that run counterspell and stuff. Obviously, we can't run counterspell if we're trying to run basic lands. That's just not a thing that our deck could do, but we could perhaps run a Force of Negation in the main deck just to give us that slight extra lift of counter magic when we need it. That is something I would consider thinking about. Or even just a good old-fashioned Spell Pierce wouldn't necessarily hurt too much either. So there's definitely a few little tweaks you could make to this deck. I'm excited that Marcus has been doing so well with it. I think it's quite a difficult deck to play because you have lots of choices. Not just like your Brainstorms and Ponders, but am I activating Starfall Storyteller this turn? And as I've discussed many times already today, how are you fetching your lands? Like, what is the order of lands you fetch? Do you have much agency in how you're fetching them? What is the order you play them? There is a lot of like minor things that make quite a big difference here. Like, am I playing into days so that I can try and resolve my next spells when we're on a short clock as well? You know, there's a lot of stuff that you have to weigh up here. So this is not an easy deck to pick up and play. And I guess it begs the question, are you preferring to work harder or smarter? Because I think you're working relatively hard for this deck. Like, the wins are pretty grindy. There's lots of little rooms for making suboptimal plays, and sometimes you won't know they're suboptimal plays until your opponent does something and you go, oh, if I'd have done it the other way around, then it would have been better. And I am a little concerned about the ability to close. I think possibly Wandering Emperor in the main deck could be a way to help you close games out a little bit more. I just felt like I wanted something, you know, some sort of game-ending threat like Murktide region here instead of the full-on grind, or like Uro out of the green-blue control decks is that sort of threat for them. So I'm not really sure how to tweak this beyond the little change in the mana base that I would like. I think I'd have to play a lot more games with it to work it out. But it's pretty cool. It's nice to see somebody developing something in the control space that's a little bit new. I'm a massive fan of Starfall Storyteller. I've played this in a bunch of different decks, and I was really high on this card until Orcish Bowmasters got printed, and we did see Orcish Bowmasters a few times in this league. So it's definitely something that is rearing its ugly head again. Although I quite like Orcish Bowmasters as a card just in general. It does feel like this card kind of wishes it didn't have to play black sometimes. But I think Orcish Bowmasters is one of the best cards in this deck. So it's very hard to get away from that. The Urza Sagas also weren't incredible. You could trim an Urza Saga. The Disappearing Land problem, when we've already mentioned some of the mana stuff going on. I think you could possibly be a 3 Urza Saga list. And maybe get something else in there. It's just something to think about. Alright, I think we are done for today, so thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one. And congratulations to Marcus for grinding a bunch of leagues with this deck and smashing some people up and giving us something a bit more unusual to play in the current meta. Alright, once again, thank you so much for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and goodbye. If you'd like to support me in the channel, please check out my Patreon. It has a free guide to budget turbo depths as well as 3 tiers of support. A low-cost one that enters you into my monthly raffle for a free donation deck on the channel, a mid-tier subscription that gives you access to my detailed turbo depths guide that is updated every month as well as regular articles, and lastly, the higher tier gives you all of the above as well as a monthly donation deck for my channel. If you're interested in supporting the channel this way, please check out the link in the description.